Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, Stephanie, how do you record your podcast? And I said, with the Anchor app on my phone. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app to get started. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl and your host Stephanie Hardy. For this special episode, I had an amazing and soul-nourishing conversation with 1/3 of the Jobber Tears podcast trio, Janelle from the HR. We're talking about the state of wrestling, beautiful wrestling fan stories, and how we feel about the win of Bianca BelAir at this year's Royal Rumble. So sit back, relax, and listen to this episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Janelle?
Yes.
Hey.
Hey, girl.
What up?
What happened?
Thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, Janelle.
I am honored to be selected, and I'm the first out of my trio to do it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost lined up perfectly with what's happening now. So, hey.
We couldn't have written a better outline than what's going on right now. So I'm excited.
Right, but before we get into that, because I'm really pumped to get into that part of our conversation, but I got to start by asking you, a bunch of other questions first. And the first one is, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
I fell in love in wrestling. I would say I was about 7, 8. I was up late at night. So like here, I'm from New York. So here, there used to be a show on NBC called Showtime at the Apollo, and it used to come on at 1:00 in the morning here in New York. So I would watch it, but everybody was like, my grandmother and my mom, everybody was like, once Apollo goes off, you go off, like cut all that stuff off, go to bed, because it was Saturday. But at like 6, 7, 8 years old, I stumbled upon ECW at 2:00 in the morning. So I would watch wrestling. That's why even now, like as an adult, I can watch wrestling mute. Because as a kid, that's how I started watching wrestling, because I didn't want anyone to know I was awake. So I would watch ECW on public access TV here in New York at 2:00 in the morning, mute. And that's kind of where everything started from there.
So you would watch ECW with no sound?
No sound.
My goodness.
And as time progressed, I probably would have the volume on like a smidge so I could hear Joey Styles talk, but other than that, it was mute. So I would just be watching, and I'm like that. Really, any type of wrestling, mute and be okay.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's so interesting, because I feel like the weirdest thing I ever did in terms of watching wrestling was I think one time I was in a car with my boyfriend and he had the network playing during a pay-per-view, but we were listening to it through his Bluetooth. That was the weirdest thing I had ever experienced, because I had always watched wrestling along with the sound. I had never just listened to it, but he likes that because he's old. He's old inside.
Wait, how old? I was about to say, is he old for real?
No, he's 28. But he has an old soul, is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
He has a very old spirit. So it's doing stuff like that, that's just kind of different from what we're used to in our age range. Is just something that fascinates him. But to me, I'm like, what? How is this gonna work?
Right. Like it's funny because my boyfriend, he's used to it now. Like if I have the TV mute, so like if we're on the phone or if he's in the house with me here and I have it mute, like now he's used to it. And he at first used to get upset, like, why is this mute? Like, turn the volume up. And I'd be like, no, it's okay. Like, and I don't know, I just feel like it's more like I've been able to, I think, have a different appreciation for wrestling, even just watching it mute, because of my focus isn't the sound, it's more the visual. So I'm watching technical wrestling. I fell in love with, and that's probably why. But like the moves and how everything transitioned, so kind of seeing the business on that aspect, but mute, I think that's what made things a lot better for me in the beginning. And then of course, as the older I got, of course the sound came on. But it's even the same how, like, if you go to a show, you don't hear commentary,
right?
So it's the same concept. So at first it wasn't weird to me going to a live show, because I was just like, oh, that's just how I started watching wrestling anyway. You guys are just catching up.
Oh, that's so cool. So, had you ever had a vision of yourself using your voice in wrestling before you and Sir Wilkins and Mr. Black created the Job of Tears podcast?
Absolutely not. I tell anybody that asks me, like, no. And actually, out of the three of us, I've been the only one to do commentary for shows. So even that opportunity, or the opportunities I've had to do that, because I've done that a bunch of times here in New York and in Jersey, I never envisioned that. Like, I've always had a love for wrestling. Anyone that knows me knows this is like, wrestling is life. But I've never had that like to want to like work in the business. I'm probably more or less now, like I would see myself doing certain things, but I never, like, everyone's always like, well, apply for WWE. And I'm like, I never had, like, that never was my goal. Like, that never was something on the table for me. Like, I just love the business. So did I ever envision like my voice getting to ears and people actually caring about, our opinions? Absolutely not. Like, I went into podcasting. Me and Sir Wilkins actually did a podcast. We started a podcast previous to the one we have now. And even doing that, I did it because he's my best friend. I did it more or less because I was like, well, he needs a female. I'm going to be mad if it's somebody else. I'll make the time. But I did it because it was something he visioned. So I never really was like, thought it would turn into what it is today at all. So it definitely has caught me by surprise, to say the least.
Okay. So how exactly did you, Sir Wilkins and Mr. Black, even like connect and meet? And what made you guys decide to like have this show and what it is now?
So Sir Wilkins started, so here in New York, he does viewing parties. It actually is funny because Facebook always reminds you sometimes good things, sometimes terrible things, because that Facebook memory catch you up. Mm-hmm. But actually this today, but in probably listening terms, it'll be a few days after. But Facebook reminded me we've been friends for 9 years. So I said, oh my God. And, he's been doing the viewing parties for 9 years. So I think I was fresh out of college and I came across a viewing party in the city. And I dragged my boyfriend at the time. I said, come, let's go to the viewing party. I watch wrestling. It was hard to watch wrestling in college because I didn't have the channel. I didn't have pay-per-view. So I would only really catch wrestling when I was home for like breaks. So I said, let's go. It's at a bar. We can go eat, drink. So I met Sir Wilkins at the viewing party. It was his first one he did 9 years ago at Royal Rumble. So Rumble is the viewing party anniversary.
Oh.
So yeah, so it's kind of bittersweet that we didn't have one this year because of COVID, but next year it'll be super amazing because it'll be 10 years. So it's gonna, it's bittersweet. But he started doing the viewing parties. I went to the very first one at Highland Park here in New York. And we had been friends ever since. I had been going probably religiously throughout the years. The only times I've probably missed viewing parties is if I was actually at the show. And just fast forwarding to maybe 4 years ago, the wrestling group that we were a part of at the time, Sir Wilkins wanted to start a podcast. So shout outs to Leo, who's our old camera guy. So Leo kind of like pushed him and was like, you should do the podcast. So me, him, and another individual did a podcast. And it kind of was, I don't want to say a test run, but it was just for us to get used to things, for us to kind of build a brand. It wasn't Java Tears yet. It was just kind of like, it was something different. So fast forward almost a year and a half after we started that, creative differences happened, and that happened, you know, in life. So me and Sir Wilkins decided we were going to start our own. And then he entered Mr. Black, which is his actual blood brother. People do not believe that. I tell people all the time, they are actual brothers. So his brother, so Mr. Black entered the picture. And we did a pilot episode of the Java Tears podcast, which I'll tell you how we got to that name in a second. But we did a pilot episode actually on his birthday 3 years ago, on Sir Wilkins' birthday. We did a pilot episode, and then we did like our first real episode 3 years ago this past January. So we've been, it's girl, it's been highs and lows, but we came up with the name. It's funny because I'm terrible with names. I tell, even when the boys want to name episodes and stuff like that, I'm like, that's not my job. I'm terrible at it. But we were sitting after we did the pilot episode, and I always had a fascination. I don't know why, but I always had a fascination with jobbers. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, the infamous Brooklyn Brawler is probably the best jobber in the wrestling world. And he's from New York. So I was just like, you know, people always frown upon jobbers. So for us starting, it felt like we were the underdogs. Like we didn't really have podcast background. We didn't have many followers, or nobody knew who we were. So it kind of just coincided with just who we were. So that's where jobber comes. And then the tears part, it's stupid, but it is what it is. The tears represents all the fans that complain and argue. And you know how they go like smarks and tears and all. So that came from that aspect of like us debating each other and having different opinions and having complaints and having positive and negatives. So that's where the tears part came from. So we just put it together. So we felt like we were the underdog podcast that debated one another. And then fast forward 3 years later, we have a whole network of other podcasts under us, including our own. So it's been a journey. I will say it's been highs, it's been lows. It hasn't been easy because, you know, once again, they're brothers. So, you know, that personal aspect does play a role. And I'm Sir Wilkins' best. Me and him are best friends. And, you know, me and Mr. Black, we're friends. So it's like me in the middle of always things. So I'm just always trying to keep everybody balanced. But for the most part, we've done, I think, a pretty good job at just having fun. And I think that's the one thing we value about the podcast is that we have fun doing it. It's not something where it's dreading, you know, it's something like, oh, here we go again. Like, you know, like a job. But we genuinely, through all of our differences, we enjoy wrestling and we enjoy talking about it. And I think that's what keeps us going. And honestly, people that we've met through wrestling, I met my best friend through, Sir Wilkins through wrestling. You know, I've had opportunities to do things through wrestling. I've met amazing people, friends that are now family through wrestling. So I'm always thankful for everything that's happened with the podcast. Because we started it, but we will definitely always tell people it's bigger than us. Because it was important for us to always make sure that we spotlighted and highlighted that, we're all Black podcasts and that in wrestling. Mm-hmm. And that's, was very rare, I think, 3 years ago. Not to say that there weren't, a lot of other podcasters like us that were around. But I think just so that we always made sure that, listen, we can talk about some wrestling, that's fine. But we also want to create a platform for wrestlers that look like us to be able to promote themselves, to be able to talk about their journey and their stories. And we've had some phenomenal interviews that I'm always, thankful for. I always tell them, like, my favorite one of my favorites was when we interviewed JTG from Crime Time. And we also did like we did Chad and we did him, like we did Crime Time, but we did them separately. But and then meeting them and then creating that relationship. And then, when Chad passed away, like, we took that really hard because, he gave us such great advice and was always supportive. And it's hard like that in, I think, a business where we are the minority, but we're all we got, So for anyone that's, come and interviewed on our show and just been supportive of our podcast, we don't take that for granted because it's, people don't have to. Just like you don't have to, work with us. We're thankful because we're all here for each other.
Yeah, all of that was incredibly well said, because it seems like that is like one of the coolest origin stories I've ever heard in my life. Like, for anything, how you have your superhero who has like that amazing origin story or something. That's probably one of the best origin stories I've ever heard behind the show starting.
Yeah, because it was so organic for us. It was just like, it started off like we just want to talk wrestling to, this is bigger than us. So we have to position ourselves for people, for other people to get put on, because it's not, 2-3 years from now, who's to say, everybody may want to start a family, people have different jobs, opportunities. So, we live for the moment that we're in, but we position it where people around us can also benefit. Because I always tell people, and you can attest, I'm like, listen, this is not about me. I don't want the spotlight. I'm good, because I always feel like your success is my success. And that's how we've always gone into anything we've done with the podcast. Is like, listen, if you're successful, we've done our job. So
right. So I want to ask you, since you did talk about, the relationship between Sir Wilkins and Mr. Black as real life, brothers, how does it feel sort of being the mediator warrior, amongst them? Because they're so very headstrong. That's something I've noticed since I've started listening and sort of watching you guys, is the fact that when the both of them have either the same opinion or differing opinions, they just kind of go at it like real rough, like brothers and sisters do. Because I know I have a sister. So how does it feel to kind of be in the middle of that?
It's not easy at all. Everyone always says, they're like, yo, I don't know how you do it, because, both the boys are very headstrong, as you mentioned. They're very, they say, they mean what they say and say what they mean. So it's just like, how are you able to balance them out? And I'm just like, I don't know. It's just, I think for the most part, I'm able to respect both of their opinions, even though sometimes we do butt heads and things happen. But I think I'm able to keep them on a path where, okay, this is the topic, you guys can free reign, but I'm gonna wheel this back in so that we can move on to the next topic. So I think it just was, us, and it didn't happen overnight, trust me, because but I think being able to find a balance in, letting them have their opinion, being able to rebuttal or agree with each other, but it's not always, but I think also it's knowing the individual outside of podcasts. I think that plays a huge role, and I think it's beneficial to the show that, after we record, I can call, I speak to Sir Wilkins, if not every day, every other day. And, me and Mr. Black, our friendship has grown because I realized, like, being able to understand each individual is the way that I'm able to maneuver the show. So being able to know what triggers or what things to say, what not to say, what things, they get excited about. So let them have fun with that, but then wheel them back in when I need to. So I think it's just also being able to build that relationship outside of the podcast world, I think has really probably helped me out. But I think also just me, like he said, we're both like, we give off mama vibes. And I've always been that type of friend where everyone always looks to me like I'm the mom of the group. So I'm just like, I guess it's just natural because, you know, I genuinely care about both of them. I care about, you know, everybody in our inner circle, on our network, and, you know, everything we built on. You know, Rome was built in a day, so it's that kind of concept. So I'm always thankful of, you know, our trials and tribulations, because it's made us better people. Not so much like, even like the podcast is gonna be what it is, but like I always tell people, when we walk away from this shit, what do we have? And I always remind them, and that to me is more important than, you know, ever getting on a mic and saying Jobber Nation or anything. Like, what do we walk away with? Like, I want everybody to know who we are as individuals and be able to be cool with that. Like, I want to be able to be at a bar and drink and talk wrestling and not have to worry about recording sometimes, or be able to take trips and, you know, have different experience. Like, my favorite is when me and, I wish Mr. Black would have went with us, when me and Sir Wilkins, we had went, now it's almost 2 years, we had went to WrestleCade, which is like a big convention down in Winston-Salem. So it's kind of like the South little, I feel like it's like a miniature like WrestleMania weekend in a sense, because they have shows throughout the weekend, but it's all like indie stuff. But then they have old school, they have like, the year we went, Impact was involved. I think the year before that, ROH was involved heavy. I think Cody was involved heavy. So, but like having those experiences where we can like meet and have conversations, like I legit had probably an hour conversation. Like, I know they probably was pissed at me because they wanted to go and eat, but I had an hour conversation with Stevie Ray. Like, legit stood there. I took a picture with him. I said, listen, I love what you guys have done for the business, because that's my thing, is always being appreciative. But literally, we were chatting it up for like an hour, like he was Uncle Stevie Ray. Like we hadn't seen each other in a decade, and that was the first time I met that man. But being able to have that opportunity to like just sit and like talk to, you know, one half of probably one of the best WCW tag team champions, and it being a black man, and hearing his real life, like hearing real time stories, like how he said, I only remember the first time we won the titles. After that, it's a blur. I was like, wait, what? What do you don't remember? He's like, no. I just know they kept giving us the title. I was like, oh my God. But honestly, hearing it from his mouth and being able to laugh and talk with him. So like those things I value so much more, because those are the opportunities and events that we rarely get to do, but we were able to do. And I hope, my hope and prayer this year, when everything kind of cools down, is that the three of us are able to go to a show outside of here and just have fun. Because we don't get to all three of us get, like, sometimes it'll be me and Mr. Black together. Like, one time me and Mr. Black went to one of our, like, we have a lot of friends in the indies. So we went to go support one of our, you know, two of our friends, and Road Dogg was doing a meet and greet. So he already knows. He's like, so we're gonna go over there. I'm like, yes, we're gonna go. We're gonna meet. We're gonna take a picture. But having the moment where Road Dogg said, "Oh, you didn't know," and me and Mr. Black marked out, we marked out together. Those are the moments I live for. Like, we can always record, but like those moments outside and behind the mic, I live for it way more.
Okay, so I think what I want to ask you now is, what is the most out of control thing that is taking place on the show?
Where do I start? You know what? I hope you ask this question to the three of us, and I want to see what the both of them say.
I'll make a note of
like
that.
I legit, I'm intrigued. Like, I'm interested in seeing what they think is, because mine would be, there's so many moments without really giving things away. I have two. The first one is, and they have a clip, like it was on, like we were recording, was them talking about Sunny Kiss. It fucked me up so bad because I said, what? Because it wasn't because of what they said. It just was how random it was. It was just like, are you guys serious right now? And it was one of the times that they both agreed, and they rarely agree with each other. So it was just even another level of what? They were talking about how beautiful Sunny Kiss was. And it threw me off, because I was just like, not because Sunny Kiss is not beautiful, like, we love him, but it was just like so random. Like, it literally is a clip. It's like probably a throwback clip. Maybe either our first year, or no, we were recording at the school, so maybe like year and a half, year 2, they just went in a tangent about Sunny Kiss, and I just was like, are y'all serious right now? But it was so dope, and Sunny appreciated it. So because we've seen Sunny kind of grow up in the business, because he was training at Warriors, and our 2 of our really close friends trained there too. So seeing kind of Sunny Kiss grow in the indies, and then now being on AEW, it's really cool. Like, it's really, really cool to see certain people grow that we've seen here at home on the indie scene. Like, even like, shout out to Tasha Steele, who absolutely loves Sis. Like, that's family. And seeing her being one half of the Knockout tag team champions, like, that's amazing. Like, we would have never not thinking that she would be that successful, but just so proud of her. So that part of them talking about Sunny Kiss. But the other one would be anytime where we started recording in the beginning live and we've either had an argument in pre-production that has now carried over into the first 10 minutes of the episode, where we've had actually like cut off the live feed. Like, it's hilarious. Like, I think it's maybe 2 times that's happened where we've just cut the live feed, and it just was like, and it's because either we've all argued with each other, or the boys have argued with each other, and I'm just sitting there confused, like, what are we doing? But we're human, and once again, they're real life brothers, so it could be some real personal shit that I just be that. And I had I told them, said, there's certain things I'm never gonna understand because y'all brothers, but when we walk through that door, y'all gonna have to leave that stuff outside the door, because we have one focus and one job to do. But that's the negative. But the positive one was the Sunny Kiss one, so I was like, I'm gonna have them find it and send it to you so you can see what I'm talking about, because my face was so naturally like, what the fuck? like, are y'all serious right now? And like I said, it wasn't negative. It wasn't the fact that we were talking. It was just like, okay, the both of you are agreeing with each other. The both of you are sitting here saying this man is beautiful. I was just like, y'all doing the most, but I love it. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to ask, who has been your favorite guest so far?
Oh, outside of Shad, of course, because I just feel like that's a given. Because he really, like, I look back, he was so raw and uncut. And he literally was like, you guys can ask me whatever you want. Like, it does not matter. And I value that, because we were able to see different see his point of view, because, growing up, you were like, oh, they just shucking and jiving. And he was just like, no, like, it was well thought out. It was, they wanted to take pieces of like a living color. Like, he broke it down for us. So the Shad Gaspar interview is definitely like there. But the other one, oh my god, we've done a lot of interviews. I would probably say definitely Shad. The one, it's okay. I'm gonna give you top 3 because I feel like that I could think of, and that was kind of kind of the gift and the curse of being in a pandemic. Was we actually probably got some of our best interviews the last year. We had one with Leo Rush, which to this day, I feel like someone listened to the episode, and that's what started the whole Leo Rush comment that he said on our podcast was what was put on TMZ. So the whole thing about him having the issue with Mark Henry we spoke about that on our on the interview, and it literally wasn't even like a week after, and it hit the internet. Like Leo Rush is talking bad about Mark Henry, but everything that was said on our interview. So I always say someone's listening, and it just hasn't hit, but someone's listening. So the Leo Rush one, which was really, really good. And Leo was, I feel like now he worked us because he's wrestling again. But it was really good because, he was just fun and cool to talk to. So, and the other one, of course, I would say is the daughter of late, great Eddie Guerrero. When we interviewed Shaul Guerrero.
That was a great one. I love that.
She was so much fun. So cool. It was parts where we were getting emotional, and I was just like, because you never would grow up, and you grow up, you watch Eddie, and Eddie passed, so you just but you would never think like I'm talking to the actual daughter of Eddie Guerrero. Like, what? Like Vicky Guerrero's daughter. So but she was so cool and just very honest, and I think that's the one thing I can always appreciate when anyone's come on the show is their honesty. Their honesty is beyond, like we've had one indie wrestler. He actually did his last interview with us. He did his retirement interview, and it was just like, what? And he was just like, if there's a platform I'm going to do it on, it's going to be you guys. And I was just like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, an indie guy that had been, in the business over 10 years here in the New York tri-state area. And he was just like, you guys, I wouldn't have any other platform to do it on that's gonna let me be as honest as I want to be. But I would say, yeah, Shaul, Leo, and of course Shad Gaspar would probably be the three I think we had the best. But even the last one we did with Mega Ran, shout out to Mega Ran. He's awesome. He's just such a dope person, and being also a friend of the podcast, but then also, being able to be successful in wrestling and now being an author. It's just, we've had a lot of dope people, whether it's small or big. So I never take for granted anyone that wants to come on the show, because I really get blown away when people even ask, can we be on the show? And I'm just like, but why? It's just us.
Oh my god.
Literally, I'm like, but why? And they're like, why not? So I'm just like, what? Are you
Exactly. That's how I felt. I was just like, I cannot tell you how excited I was when Sir Wilkins asked me to be on the show. I was like, are you serious? I was crunk. I felt like I had made it.
Oh my god! See, and what's so funny?
In my soul, I was like, I made it. You're that's literally I have the flyer still pinned on my Twitter that they made for my episode. It's still on my Twitter page right now.
But see me, I be looking at people like, are y'all sure y'all want to be on this? Because they could be great. They sometimes can be unpredictable. So I don't. And the weird part about it is I don't know. I guess I have a superstition. I never listen to the episodes, so I've never. And I tell people all the time, it's just that it's no shade. It's just that I that's just not my wave. I'll record, it'll be what it is. That's it, and move on. But when we do have guests, I do try to listen back to those and just see how they went. But with your episode, it was so funny because the background story to that is I couldn't do the episode because it was my boyfriend's birthday weekend, and we had went away, and the guys was like, who should we get? And we threw a few. They threw a few names out, but then Wilkins, I said, you know what? I'm gonna ask Stephanie. I said, great, because y'all need female energy to balance y'all out. So anytime they've had another guy and it's just the three guys, it's probably too much. So having another female, I think, is always a good thing. And also you having your own podcast. Like I said, I never wanted to just be about us. I want people to come on and be able to promote themselves, be able to give their thoughts and opinions, because that matters. So I never want it to be, it's just us. No, trust me, if I could, I would shoot. Stephanie, you can always do the podcast. I can hot tag you in at any time if that's the case, because I just would rather see, I don't know, I would rather see your success is my success. So as long as you good, we all good here. So, but yeah, but I'm glad that you were able to be a guest and enjoy and know that you are now a part of the Jabatiers family. Like I always tell people, like once you in forever. So
oh, thank you so much. I feel so honored, and I feel like you just hugged me through the phone.
I was moving my hands. You can't see me, but I was moving my hands like I was hugging, because I was just like, because I feel that way, because it's just, because people always ask, you know, if I talk to someone else or I do another podcast, and they always ask, like, how does it feel being the only girl? And I'm just like, I'm just always blessed, because I think, you know, our podcast, you know, everyone of color that's doing a podcast that deals with wrestling is showing the world that Black people love wrestling. And growing up, growing up, even when we started the podcast, growing up, it was more of a hush thing. It was like, don't tell anyone you like wrestling, because they're going to think you're weird and they're not going to want to hang out with you. But literally anyone that knows me, whether I went to junior high school with you, know that I've always loved wrestling. So being able to have a platform that I have now is just, it brings joy to meet other people like that. And for us to kind of create our own community. That's why not having the viewing parties suck, because it's our little community that we've cultivated and that people feel safe. Like anytime people has come, it's their first time. It's almost like church. First time, come, we welcome all, come as you are. But they always say, I've never seen so many people that look like me in one space that watches wrestling. And that's how I know what we do is bigger than us.
That is amazing. That is so beautiful. That actually ties into a question I almost asked you. So you basically answered it by just saying that, and that just blows my mind. And it's really beautiful how you created this thing and you realize that it's bigger than you, and then you've made this space for people of color, like, and Black people, definitely, specifically, you know, who love wrestling, because it's just like, it's been more so of a family thing for some people, because it's like, for me, it was like my grandma and then my dad and then me. And it's like anytime I was at school and they would sort of talk about wrestling occasionally, I would then jump in on the conversation, and I would never really bring it up because it wasn't viewed as like a cool thing, like you said. So it was kind of the same thing for me, but it became more acceptable, you know, towards high school a little bit, because you had a lot of people, you know, who knew that I was into wrestling because I was the girl who didn't come to school the Monday after WrestleMania 27 because we had just got back, you know, from Atlanta, because it's not that far. But they knew that. And then of course, once I went to college, and it was more so of, you know, a more diverse amount of people there, you know, who actually liked wrestling, you know, that was the more I started becoming more comfortable with addressing it with people more so my age. So I'm really glad that you guys have built yourself up to a point to where you can help other people who are, you know, creating content and also making safe spaces for fans. You know, that's beautiful. You can have that.
So like when like the viewing parties, or if we all go like to an indie show all together, or like one year, the year of WrestleMania was in New Orleans. It was like we went down there. It was like 20 of us, and I would say 80% of who went, like within our like group, that was their first WrestleMania. So to be able to kind of like be on Bourbon Street with all of our friends and people wrestling in the streets and being at WrestleMania and then going to Raw after and SmackDown after, like to be able to have those type of memories, I'm all about the experience. So when we were in the planning stages of it, I was really excited because it was the first time that like I went to a place for WrestleMania and like 20 of my friends were with me at the same time. So it was really cool to just have that type of environment where we will all be like, all right, we're going to all meet up at this, and then be able to bar hop and be able to meet wrestlers and, that type of experience. And I was even more happy for those that it was their first time, because by then New Orleans, that was my third WrestleMania. No, that was number 4. So for me, I was just
wow.
I'm kind of used to this, but because you got to work your way up to building the stamina to sit in a stadium for 8 hours.
Oh my gosh, I imagine it really isn't that easy. But I feel like once you're in the WrestleMania air, for me, I just forgot. I forgot how long I was there, and I was just happy to just be there and just sit there in the Georgia Dome and just be just out. And then by the time it was all over, I was just like, oh God, it really is like 11 o'clock.
We were exhausted. It was everyone was exhausted. Especially those that it was their first time, because I think the format of how WrestleMania is now, where they have it, well, not this year coming up, but where they, it's literally all day. You get in a stadium 3-4 o'clock. You don't get out till 11, 12, if that. That's a whole probably 8-hour shift. So if you're not used to sitting and watching that all in one shot, I have a picture of a friend of mine. We got back to the hotel after we left WrestleMania in New Orleans. When we left the stadium, we walked a little bit, and then he was tired of walking, so then we finally got an Uber back to the hotel. I have a picture of him laid out on my bed, laid out, curled up like a baby in his Roman Reigns outfit, sleep, because he was so tired. But then he took a little power nap, and then we went back on bourbon and we drank, so we couldn't drink no more. So, but yeah, I live for the memories. I live for the moments, and I think that to me is more important than anything. It's being able to share those, small moments of, or even me and Sir Lucas went down to Charlotte, because we have a lot of friends that wrestle down in the Charlotte areas, North Carolina, South Carolina area. And seeing our friend win the title in front of us, stuff like that, I live for that. I take that any day of the week over regular shit. So I'm blessed, and I'm happy that I get to talk to people like you and laugh and be able to be excited about wrestling, because that's really what it's about.
Right. So that's a perfect segue into my next question. How do you feel about the state of wrestling as a whole, positive and negative? And this can also tie into the independent scene and even the mainstream scene. Just how do you feel about it from a positive side and from a negative side?
I think, and I know we're going to talk about the big win. I know we're going to get there. But the moment when that moment happened, we're going to talk about it. But that moment happened, a friend of mine, he wrestles, he's an independent wrestler. He calls me. And the first thing I said to him was, there is no excuse for anyone of color to not excel in wrestling right now. There's no excuse. If there is a time, if there was any time to go out and live your dream as a wrestler, this is the time. Where there's so many different opportunities, so many different schools, the resources are there. And that's one thing we've talked about on our podcast is in the inner cities, growing up, there weren't a lot of resources. There weren't a lot of wrestling schools available or affordable and things like that. But I think now more than ever, it's available. It's possible. To see the impossible become possible, that's amazing. That's really what it's about. So I think the current state of wrestling, there's so much more left to do. I think it's hard because wrestling is that sport where it's it can have that dog eat dog mentality, or that eye for an eye, I only look out for myself. But I think the good thing about it though is there's a lot more there's a lot more people that are hungry and willing to learn the business, to soak up the knowledge, to be able to progress in the business. I think and I think a part of that, you know, as crazy as us living in a pandemic has been, it's been the reset button that I think wrestling needed. And I mean that in both on the indies and also mainstream. And I say both because you've been able to see people that you would if we weren't living in a pandemic, have an opportunity. You would have never seen Leon Ruff,
right,
that came out of A.R. Fox's wrestling school down in Atlanta, that wrestled for Evolved, become North American champion. You would have never seen that. You would have never seen there's a whole bunch of stuff you would have never seen. You would have never seen WWE become probably thinking outside of the box and creating a Thunderdome. You would have never thought of, you know, AEW being the company that it is and obtaining the wrestlers it obtained. You know, so it's been probably harder definitely on the indies because of the restrictions and things like that. But the South has been running safely, and I've seen a lot of my friends being able to kind of train and get their body right, so that when the world does open up, they have the opportunities. You know, like my friend, he won was it Rising Star of the Carolinas for 2020. Shout out to Zuka King. Like, being able to still make a name for yourself with no excuses, I think that's been the positive. The negative is, I think, you know, especially as a female, there's so many, I think, more things women can do in the wrestling business. And my wish and hope is that those doors people can break through and being able to get those opportunities. Like, I thought it was phenomenal. Like, I had met, and this was probably a little over a year and a half ago when MLW was here in New York. And me and Sir Wilkins had went because they was doing TV tapings down here. And I said that one person I want to meet is Selena De La Renta. And everybody looked at me crazy. They was like, why? And I was like, for her to be the first Latina to ever produce a wrestling show for that company, I said, I have to meet her. Like, you couldn't tell me different. And when I met her, I thanked her. I said, listen, as an Afro-Latina myself, for you to break that wall, that means we all have a possibility to do that. So my hope is that the business, indies and mainstream, that we create more opportunities for women, just in general, not even just women of color, just women, where it's not, you know, we're getting out of that mentality of, oh, it's the bathroom break, or they don't know how to wrestle, or they're just pretty. We've gotten kind of out of that, which is good. But now we have to get in the mentality of the behind the scenes, like where women can produce a match, where women can be an owner of an independent wrestling company. Like, that's my wish, because I think there's so much more power in that. So, of course, you gotta, you know, you're playing in the boys playing, you know, playground. I feel like all the time I'm always outnumbered. I'm always the only girl in the group. But I make sure that whatever I do, I'm able to drag another female along with me and being able to be like, listen, I could do it, she could do it, the girl behind her could do it. So I think that, especially because everyone always knows, if you listen to the podcast, I'm so disappointed in AEW's women's division. But I think my wish and hope is that they kind of figure it out, because there's so many talented women out there that it doesn't make sense that you have this platform where you wanted to create diversity and opportunity and you don't do it. So my hope is that, you know, the wrestling business realize the power in women in wrestling. But also the negative too is just like the low key like hush about when, you know, there was that whole period of time when the pandemic started and people were getting canceled and people were getting sex allegations and stuff like that. Like, my hope is that, you know, we've cleaned that up to where people have a you know, respect for women in the locker room. It should never be where, you know, females feel like they can't say because they won't get an opportunity. So I think cleaning that up,
right?
But in all, this is the best time to be a wrestler. To be honest, there's no excuse.
Okay, so to also tie into what you were just saying, all of which was very profound. In terms of women of color, what are some ways in which we can continue to take up space in the fandom? Because there have been multiple cases, and this has happened to me too since I've started, where you will voice an opinion and then somebody, you know, will have an issue with what you're saying, or they'll disrespect you if they don't like what you're saying. So what are some ways in which we can continue to show up in spite of, you know,
I mean, it's gonna happen
in the fandom?
I experienced it this morning. Someone tried to pull the race card on me, and it was like, listen, if I wanted it to be a race situation, I would have just said it. I don't got no problem saying it. I think it's something you can't avoid it. Your opinion is gonna be your opinion, whether it's male, female, or whatever you just, you know, identify. People gonna disagree with you, but you have to be able to stand your ground and being able to always put you first. Like, it doesn't, like, not everybody's gonna agree. Everybody that listens to the podcast probably thinks I hate AEW. Probably thinks I hate it. And I had to be very clear and say, it's not that I hate the company. Because they're quick to put, you hate it. But they're quick to say that instead of really listening to what I'm saying. They'll take one thing and they'll run with it. And it's like, that's not what I said. And it could be male or female. But I think as a woman of color, you're going to get people. It's going to happen. It's not something that you could prevent. However, you have to always stand your ground. Don't apologize. That's the one thing I learned from the lovely Faye Jackson. She taught me. She's definitely big sis on this one. Know your worth. Know your value. And don't apologize for anything that you do. And when she told me that, I said, heard you, sis. And that was it. So I say that to anyone listening. Know your worth, know your value. People gonna listen. There's trolls on the internet. You can't control that. Can't get upset over things you can't control. But stand your ground and know your worth. And know that your opinion matters. And guess what? If they don't hear you today, they don't hear you tomorrow, you keep talking. They're gonna eventually hear you. Because that was the thing. I never really think people cared about my opinion until we started doing the podcast. Like, people legit. People
Same
will legit
thing,
like sidebar me and be like, what do you think about this? And I'm like, what does it matter what I think? And they're like, no, like, what do you think? And I'm like, okay. So it creeps me out still to this day. I'm like, why are you asking me of all people? Ask someone else. But I value that my opinion matters. But my opinion matters to me. I really don't care if you agree with me or not. But to me, it just shows that we all have a common love for the business. So I can respect that. You don't have to always agree with me, but respect me as a person. If there's a level of disrespect that we can have a conversation to the side, so you know, listen, outside of this wrestling shit, I'm still a person. So, like, watch what you say. But I would say to the women, know your worth and don't apologize for anything you say. Like, because that's when people take you as a joke. Is when you be like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. No, don't be sorry. Say it with your chest. Because I'm always quick to be like, I really don't care what you think or your opinion of, but I'm gonna say how I feel and what I think. Because it happened to me this morning. The guy pulled the race card on me. I was just like, sir, if I wanted it to be a black or white thing, I would have just said it. So it's always gonna happen. You can't avoid it, unfortunately. And it's always like a double-edged sword because we're women and women of color. So it's just like, and the number one thing I used to get before was, oh, you really know your stuff. Like, people get surprised that I know who won the 1992 Royal Rumble. Like, what? Like my boyfriend makes fun of me. He's like, all right, you wrestling historian. And I'm just like, what? I'll be like, so what? I know my shit. Because if it was basketball and I had stats, you wouldn't think nothing different. So just because it's wrestling don't mean nothing. But we joke about that all the time. But it's because I know my stuff and I'd rather be educated. And also too, like if I don't know something and I speak out on something, I would rather you tell me and give factual stuff than tell me and give me opinion based stuff. Like, give me the facts. Like, if I'm wrong about something, tell me. But it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So
well said. So now we've gotten to the big part of our conversation in talking about women of color. Ma'am, how did you feel about Bianca BelAir winning the Royal Rumble Sunday?
I'm in my house snapping all fingers. Like, first of all, I cried. I cried. That's why I missed your call. Oh. You called me? And I saw it, and I was like, oh, girl, I'm disposed. I can't talk right now. I cried because it gave me moments. You know, we all live for moments in wrestling. Like, everyone, you can always ask someone where they were when Kofi won. You can always ask that. You can always ask when, let's say, when I was there when Street Profits, that was actually the last live wrestling event that I went to with people, was the Raw. It was Raw here in Brooklyn. Oh, wow. And I was in the suites, and that was the Raw the Street Profits won the Raw tag team titles. I was there for that. So you live for the moments. I was there when Naomi won the title in Orlando at WrestleMania. So the moments you remember. But you never thought that a black woman would win the Royal Rumble. That was not something you grew up thinking. Let alone a female. Let's start there, because they just started doing this female Royal Rumble. So let's start from there. But to see Bianca BelAir win made me realize this is way bigger than I thought it was. And I said, as a little girl that grew up watching wrestling and not seeing so many of us on the TV screen, and to see her win, you couldn't tell me nothing. All that stuff when people was trying to be controversial and scandalous and saying her feet hit the ground, I said, y'all can't take this away from us. I'm okay. Because, and it goes back, it was even the next day after she won, when Sir Wilkins had texted me. He had messaged me a picture, and it was a still shot from NXT of Rhea, Charlotte, and Bianca. And I said, bro, they've been building this up since then. Oh my God, like, this is genius. I said, oh my God, like, I didn't even think that far back. And and then when I saw the picture, I remember Bianca saying to Charlotte, "You gonna get yours? Like, I got you." Like, and I'm just like, don't even go here. I was just like, he sent me that picture. That made me even more emotional, because I was just like, to me, it shows they're invested in her, and they've been investing in her from day one, right. And it gave me the same emotion when Kofi won. It gave me the same emotion when Barack won. I was just like, yo, we really we really could do this. And that's why when my homeboy called me, I said, there's no excuse. You better get in the gym and start training. There's no excuse. But I was excited. I'm still excited. I'm still on the high from it.
Me too. And it's just like the way, how you cried. It's like I cried when Kofi won, but I actually did not cry when Bianca won. I jumped up and down and started praise dancing. You know how you see those GIFs where people be shouting in church? That's the kind of dancing I was doing in my boyfriend's house. And his mama was like, don't break the floors. Like, the floors are not strong. The floors are not that strong. And I'm just like all over the place because I'm just so excited that this has happened to her. Because I remember when she and the Street Profits were at NXT, and NXT Live came here a couple years ago, and we took pictures with the Street Profits, and Bianca was kind of standing towards the back, with her ponytail kind of like in a little bit of a bonnet or something. And I remember just looking at her and then seeing her later on in the show and was just enthralled with who she was and how beautiful she was. And I was just like, she just exuded a level of confidence that I've seen in people, that I've gone to school with, and I see in people like my sister who's like 19, who's just brash and just like, yeah, I'm the EST, but or like, the sugar honey iced tea and all that. Like it represents something I've seen before, and the level of confidence I almost wish I had. So it was just kind of like and it's just like to see her, go this far and win, and be as excellent as she is, and seeing her, lift all these weights and be this strong and be unapologetic about who she is. It's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And then it's like when Sir Wilkins posted that picture, of them, of Rhea, Charlotte, and her. I remember how angry I was when she got pushed to the side, and Charlotte was like, this is a conversation for champions. I remember it to this day. And we were so angry because all we wanted was a triple threat between those three, but it wound up being Rhea and Charlotte or whatever. And I was like, bro, what's supposed to happen with Bianca? What's supposed to happen with Bianca? I want Bianca. Like the whole time I wanted her. That's all I wanted. And when she started coming out a whole lot more, that was when I started feeling more and more satisfied. And when she got put on SmackDown, I was like, that's great for her. So, and to see her win was just very beautiful and very emotional for me, because I'm just like, she's amazing. And then to also see her and Naomi working together to
every
stay
time
in the match.
Every time they locked up, I was just like, oh my god, this makes me so uncomfortable because I could take either one of them winning. It's okay. I'm okay if Naomi ends up winning the Rumble, even though I think Bianca should win. But to see them together and as athletic as they both are and them helping each other, I was just like, yo, I can't do with this. And it brings me back to there was a clip Bianca had posted on her Instagram. I don't know if it was an Instagram story or something, where she said almost to the year, because last year this time she I think she had a title shot on, I think it was a takeover, and it was during Black History Month. And it was when she came out with that cape and said, so she said Black Girl Magic.
Yeah, it was Takeover Portland, yes.
And that was her last takeover because they was calling her up eventually. So she played there was the clip of that, and it was Hunter it was Trip. Everyone knows knows I love Triple H. So, and I call him Trips. So Trips was telling her, like, this is going to be your last takeover. Like, you're going to get called up. And just the raw emotion she had at that moment, and then fast forward a whole year where she's now the 2021 female Royal Rumble winner. It's mind-blowing to me. Like, I'm just like in awe of the storytelling. If you haven't already watched the documentary on the network about her and about like her struggles
I have.
Of like having a disorder and being able to not feel normal, like that whole thing, I'm just like, it was almost I forgave them for not letting Sasha win the first Rumble, I was like, all right, guys, I forgive you for that one, because that one still, that sucked because she went the longest at the first one, and I was pissed. I was like, so y'all just not gonna let Sasha Banks win? That's her word? Okay. So I was pissed about that when it first happened. But now to be able to have a possible main event where it's two black women going for the title, I just keep saying, when y'all selling these tickets, so I can go risk my life a little bit to see this live, because that's all I'm waiting for, is these tickets to go on sale, because I need to be there for that moment. Like, I can't, like, because those are things you're going to be able to tell your kids, your grandkids. Like, that's why it's like, it's bigger than us, because that's history. Like, you can't take that away from her. It's just like when, what's like one of it's just like when Kofi won. It's like, you can't, like, people will sit and complain his title reign was short, the way he lost to Brock was messed up, but you can never take away the fact that he won in my backyard at WrestleMania. Like, you cannot take that away from any one of us. Like I told, like, when we had our Big Four episode that people can watch on the Jabba Tears Podcast Network, cheap plug. And when I said the story of, like, you know, thanking Kofi personally the night he won, you can't take away those moments. So I am living, like, I'm living and watching history be made. I can't be mad about that.
Yeah, I literally can't be mad about it either. It's just, it's a beautiful moment to sort of bask in, because it's just like, it's and in her entire life and her testimony, it's just a beautiful representation of going with what going with has been given to you and running with it, because she'll tell you herself that this wasn't her dream at all. Like, the fact, like, it ministers to me on a personal level, because she said this was a dream that I didn't know was a dream that turned into a reality. And that's how I really feel like me even starting this podcast as a content creator is even happening. Like, if you had told me maybe 5 years ago that I was going to start a wrestling podcast, I'd look at you like you're crazy. Like, look, I love wrestling, but I don't think I'll ever do anything like this.
Every day. I'm like,
and
listen,
it's just,
if you would have told me that I would be sitting here every week, I used to joke with the boys. I was like, this is probably the longest and consistent relationship I've had in a long time, is doing this podcast. Okay, so you're welcome, but thank you guys, but you're welcome. But if somebody would ask me, like, do you, like, looking back, do you think you would have, I'd have been like, you're joking. Like, I'm just gonna be in my little wrestling corner. But now I ain't got no choice, because I can't be in no corner. We gotta always be in a group. It's a family thing. So I'm like, okay. But I'm the same way. Like, I would have never thought that I would sit and have a podcast that people actually listen to. Like, not even that we started one, because I always, even to this day, I get surprised when people tell us, like, oh, we listen to your podcast. I'm like, really? Like, ours? Yeah, like, you serious? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, it was so funny. Me and my homegirl, we just went to Charlotte a few weeks ago, and we went to a show that it was a tournament like some of our friends were in. So, you know, I'm always big on supporting those that support us, no matter where in the world we are. If I can go and support, I'm there. So we went down there, and it was a girl sitting behind us, and me and my homegirl, we do crazy commentary. We always make jokes, crack up. So the girl behind us was another black girl. Now, mind you, we in South Carolina. It's only but 5 black people that's in the crowd. So, and that was us. So she was another black girl. So, you know, we bonded for like 2.5 seconds, and she was cracking up with us. And she said, "You look familiar." And I was like, "Excuse me?" So I thought she was talking to my friend. And she's like, my homegirl goes, "No, she's talking to you." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, you look familiar." And I'm like, I said, "I don't live here. I live in New York." And she's like, you, and this is where it gets really funny. She said, you and this fine ass bald-headed man were in, you guys were in North Carolina for WrestleCade. I mentioned to you earlier. I said, yeah. I said, oh, but you talking about Wilkins. Oh, God. I said, but yeah, I said, that's my best friend. But I said, wow. I said, you remember? She said, yeah. She said, I saw you guys there. And you got, and we kind of talked a little bit about your podcast. And I was like, the fact that, mind you, that was going on almost a year and a half later. Because that was 2019 that we was there. It was November 2019. So this is now January 2021. And that girl says that I look familiar to her. I said, okay, this is a little creepy, but all right. We making moves and places and doing things that I didn't even think were possible. So it always tickles me when someone says they listen to the podcast. I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah, and I just feel like Bianca BelAir sort of winning has just sort of lit another fire up under me to make me want to go harder and continue to do, what it is that I do best for wrestling, even though I know I'm not an athlete, but it just makes me want to go harder and continue to create a space for us to have and to just continue to share my knowledge, in my love for wrestling, because I'm just like, I cannot wait to see what else she has to offer us.
Absolutely.
And
like
she's just an inspiration every day.
Taught me there are no excuses. There's nothing, and that the impossible can be possible. Because if somebody would have asked me last year, oh, do you think a black woman would have won the Royal Rumble? I'd have been like, no, they never gonna pull that trigger. Absolutely not. I said they didn't do it to Sasha. They didn't do it with Naomi. They've had women of color that they have opportunities for. So looking fast forward now and she making the impossible possible, I was like, there are no excuses. Like, we have to go, and go hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, Janelle.
Okay.
I just have one more question to ask you. What does the future hold for you, Miss Janelle from the HR?
I always told the boys, I said, my ultimate goal, and it's like our inside joke, but I'm like dead serious. I want our podcast that now has been now a network and a platform, but I always wanted to cultivate a full agency where indie guys and girls can come and we can help them market themselves. We can help them get bookings. So my dream has always been for us to be the Rock Nation of wrestling, and especially of wrestlers of color. So that's my ultimate goal. Not saying it'll happen, but being, like I said, the opportunities that we've all had individually and as a collective, it's possible. The amount of people that we know on the indies in the South and up here, and my goal is to go even a little further out west, because Vegas has a really good indie scene. Texas has a really good indie scene. Going to the Midwest, I have friends in Chicago. Mm-hmm. So Chicago has a really big indie scene. So being able to explore those opportunities and options. But I've always wanted to be the Rock Nation of wrestling, where we've had people that are under us and that we support and that we market and that we, get bookings for and cultivate relationships with owners and things like that. So that's my ultimate goal. But what's next? I don't know, girl. Once this thing, really, it's for us to do the show we were supposed to do. I think once we were supposed to have our own wrestling show last July 4th. But because of the pandemic, we were not able to. So, not saying it's going to be this July 4th, but definitely within the next year or two is to do the show that we were supposed to do. Because that was going to be a game changer for independent wrestling and people of color. So, to have, we were going to have, at the time, we were going to have Crime Time co-headline. We were going to have Tasha Steelz versus Big Swole. Like, we had matches in place, and they were going to main event. So they were going to be the first all-black woman, female, to main event an indie show. So we had, when I tell you, girl, we had
oh my
plans.
gosh.
Even it was going to be Sir Wilkins' first wrestling match, and he was going to wrestle Simon Miller from What Culture. Like, we had plans. So before I can honestly walk away from the podcast, if I choose to, before anything changes in our lives, we have to throw the show we were supposed to throw. So that's the goal, is to have our own, the Jabba. We were going to have, what were we going to call it? I forgot. But we were going to, we were going to call it Jabba Slam, because that's what we called it before. So the goal is to do the show we were supposed to do. Not saying all the players that were going to be involved can be involved, because some have got signed since then, which is good. But to do the wrestling show that we were meant to do. That's the next thing for us. Well, for me, and being able to, be a part of the booking and the creative team, because I'm more the behind the scenes girl. I'm never gonna take a bump. Everyone always asks me, "Are you ever gonna get in the ring?" No, I am not. That is not for me. I'm not taking a bump for anyone. Not happening. But to be able to book people on the show and be able to be creative and being able to know the finish and being in gorilla and all that, I want to do that. So that's the goal, is to do this show we've been supposed to do. So we just waiting for Corona to chill out so we can figure it out. That was the part I think that messed up. Like, I was a little depressed about that. Like, we couldn't do it because we had so many people behind us, and people were going to come to New York. Like, it was like kind of like when WWE is in town, and you got to come up to come see the show. Like people were booking flights and booking hotels. Like, people were coming because it was also 4th of July weekend here in New York. So it was like kill two birds in one stone. You could see the fireworks, and you could also see the show, and it was going to be outdoors. I get upset thinking about it, because we worked so hard, and for it to kind of like slip away, not because of anything we did, but because, the world, stuff happens. But we're totally going to do the show that we were meant to do. If we don't do anything else, that show will be the last of the last. But that show is really what I think our focus is going to be, hopefully, to start, once the world kind of opens up a little bit. So.
Well,
yes,
I'm going to speak by
make
faith.
It work.
It's going to happen, and I'm going to be
if
there.
We can't do it here in New York, we'll find a place to do it. Trust and believe. We'll figure it out. But I'm thankful and I'm blessed to have this journey with the both of them. So always shout out Sir Wilkins and Mr. Black, because even through ups and downs behind the scenes and in front of the camera as well, I wouldn't trade our journey for anything in the world. So as corny as it may sound, but it's the truth. Like, I never saw myself doing podcasting ever. But to be able to do that on top of the other opportunities that I've had. Like, I never saw myself doing commentary. I still think I suck at it, but everyone else seems to think that I do good, and I'm like, if you say so. But to be able to have the opportunities I've had to do shows and be a part of that, and people know that it's me. Like, I never, I never grew up thinking that, especially, Black girl from New York, never. But, we've been truly blessed, and, I'm thankful that, we made it this far without killing each other. I think that's also, that's also a plus. But we love, because we love hard. So I think that's what honestly keeps us all together, is that, no matter what, we all love each other. So that's I'm going to end it off with that.
Well, Janelle from HR, thank you so much for coming on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. It is such an honor to have you on the show. I've loved this entire conversation. So if you want to, you just put yourself over and tell the people where they can find you and follow you.
Personal stuff is private.
Just do that right now.
So, but I'm not hard to find. But I always tell people you can follow us at the Job of Tears Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. The boys handle all the social media stuff. I stay out of that. But you can also follow our Facebook group chat, our Job of Tears Podcast Network. Also subscribe to our YouTube page where you can find other, not only wrestling, we're kind of branching out. We have, 2.5 Bros. We have Sasson Talk with me and Amanda. We have Game Night with Mike and Nelly. So me and my boyfriend have a little podcast thing we do. And then the Mr. Black show is coming back. So, you're trying to always expand. And, shout outs to Talk of Champions, which is under the Job of Tears Network. Shout out to Euro Sports, which is under the Job of Tears Network. So, we're trying to cultivate, once again, just that larger than life community where if you don't like wrestling, you like sports? Okay, cool. You don't like sports and you like talking about guys and girls issues? Boom, one-stop shop. So, but before we do go, I truly, and I told you this when we recorded last time, I'm honored just as much as you are, because I'm blessed that you would have even thought of to interview me and take the time out for me. So I'm just as thankful, and I wish you nothing but success. And like I told you, any way I can help, I am here. You're welcome, love. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You can catch us every Thursday live, and then we drop every Friday on all streaming platforms. So, but I'm glad you got me first. Now, but make sure you ask that question to the both of them. I want to know which one that they think is the most outrageous. It is, but thank you so much, love. And once again,
it's gonna be
wish
fun.
you nothing but the best. All right, love. Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Janelle.
Okay, so I want to send an absolutely special thank you and all the love and respect to Janelle from the HR from the Job of Tears podcast. Please go out and listen to their podcast. It's her, Sir Wilkins, and Mr. Black, who I will be having on the show in the next 2 weeks. Please listen to them and follow them wherever you can and wherever podcasts are sold and listened to. Also, check out the Hardy Wrestling Podcast on all social platforms, on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and on Twitter at Hardy WrestlePod, and listen to me on iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And until next time, this is the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie. And until next time, bye y'all.